What do you do after you've written an influential book subtitled The Sordid and Continuing History of Political Corruption in West Virginia? You run for political office, of course. I'm Dan Ringer, and I'll talk with West Virginia Supreme Court Justice Allen Loughry right now on the LawWorks.
From West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
Closed captioning for the LawWorks is made possible by a grant from the Monongalia County Bar Association to support legal information and education for all West Virginians. The LawWorks is made possible by major grants from the Office of the West Virginia Attorney General and from Software Systems Incorporated, a West Virginia company established in 1975 which provides high-end support services, programming, and consulting for county government AS400 mid-range computer systems, as well as PC-based systems, and by a grant from the West Virginia Bar Foundation. The West Virginia Bar Foundation, the philanthropic organization for West Virginia's legal profession and justice system, promoting public knowledge of the law in West Virginia.
The newest member of the West Virginia Supreme Court is Justice Allen Loughry. Justice Loughry, thank you for coming in.
Thank you very much for having me.
I'm going to introduce you based on something you did, 7 years ago. You wrote a book. The book is called Don't Buy Another Vote, I Won't Pay for a Landslide, The Sordid and Continuing History of Political Corruption in West Virginia. This book, I enjoyed reading it because it was like reading one of those tabloids that you find in the supermarket checkouts, only I could hold my head up because this is real history. And it exposes and discusses a lot that has gone imperfectly in West Virginia political history.
It does. I wrote that book, Dan, because I want to see things change positively in West Virginia.
Well, the things that you talk about, though, vote buying, appointing people to places as political favors, and much, much more. It is really an eye-opener. I practiced law in West Virginia for 35 years. I had heard of some of this. I didn't know the sordid details of most of it. And it was an eye-opener, and I enjoyed it. Once again, the name is Don't Buy Another Vote, I Won't Pay for a Landslide. I'm going to let you tell where that title came from in just a second. This is the West Virginia history they did not teach you for the Golden Horseshoe Test. And I doubt that these questions will ever be on that test. And you don't give it to middle school kids or maybe even young high school kids, but you want to read this book. Where does the title come from?
The title comes from the 1960 election in West Virginia. And John Kennedy needed to win West Virginia. It was critical to his election. And many historians will tell you that if he didn't win this state, he may have even dropped out of the race. And he was spending an incredible amount of money in the election. And he would stand up in front of a crowd to diffuse some of that criticism and pull out a purported telegram from his father and say, I just received this telegram from my dear dad.
Joe Kennedy.
Joe Kennedy said, Jack, don't buy another vote. I won't pay for a landslide. And people would often laugh at that, but the reality was there was a considerable amount of money that went into buying votes during that election.
And you detail how that worked. And I've always asked myself, how do you know? You give somebody $2 or a pint of whiskey, how do you know who they vote for? The agents of the candidate went into the voting booth with you and watched you mark your ballot, or in some cases marked it for you.
Yes.
Now, we don't do that anymore, but there are other gotchas that can happen. Okay, I didn't ask you to come here to talk about the book. I asked you to come here because you're now in the West Virginia Supreme Court, but I have to ask you, how dare you run for political office after writing this book?
Well, I'm proud of the book, and as you know, Robert C. Byrd wrote one of the introductions to the book, and John McCain wrote the other. It's a very nonpartisan look at our political system, and I think that it's important that we always look and find ways to improve upon things that we've done in this state.
But you kind of threw yourself into the belly of the beast, the political system here in West Virginia. You came in against a candidate from a very influential family in the general election. Did you expect to win?
Well, yes, I did.
That's good, I suppose.
But one thing about it is, I said with my wonderful wife Kelly and my terrific little boy named Justice, he's Justice Loughry, and I also wanted to be Justice Loughry, that we were going to run a positive campaign and let the chips fall where they may. And that's what we did. We traveled the state. I traveled the state very hard. We had very positive campaign commercials. We tried to reach people directly, and we were successful in winning a seat on the Supreme Court.
You were not a stranger to the Supreme Court.
I've worked there for the last 10 years, and now I had to move, after the November election, I had to move things in boxes from the 4th floor to the 3rd floor.
What role did you fulfill while you were at the Supreme Court, or roles while you were?
I was a lawyer at the court, and worked for various judges throughout the years, justices, and had worked with opinions and just anything that you do at the Supreme Court. It was very. I really enjoyed working at the Supreme Court, and was honored to have that role, and most certainly honored to have this opportunity right now.
You probably wrote a lot of drafts of things for the justices, or memos about the law of things.
We certainly have worked on literally thousands and thousands of cases that have been in front of the Supreme Court, like many others who work there also. There's a tremendous amount of work at the court, and we are one of the busiest, if not the busiest, courts in the United States.
I have heard that frequently said, and so that begs the question. There's been lots of talk about whether we need an intermediate appellate court. Do you have an opinion about whether something of that nature is necessary?
I think that the court, one thing that has been beneficial is we have been moving in an incredibly positive direction the last few years, and in fact we revamped our entire rules, appellate rules.
Right.
And this was a considerable undertaking, and it was looking at other states and looking at how they do things, and it was changing the rules from top to bottom, and it changed the way we do things. It changed the way that any case comes before the court, and that alone was a tremendous change in how things happen. We have developed business courts, we have developed drug courts, so I think we're moving in a very positive direction.
I'm talking with the newest member of the West Virginia Supreme Court, Justice Allen Loughry. I'm Dan Ringer, and this is The Law Works. We probably ought to give a little context to what we're talking about. In West Virginia, we have 3 levels of courts, 3 distinct levels of court. First is the magistrate court. Some places will call that a JP court. We've done away with that system, that particular system. Some will call it the small claims court. It was magistrate court. Then we have the court where you think of trials taking place. Judges in robes, you don't wear white wigs anymore, but justices in dark robes, juries, that sort of thing. That's the circuit court. And then in West Virginia, if you want to appeal a decision that's rendered by the circuit court, it goes to the West Virginia Supreme Court. There is no court in between. And the discussion historically, or the discussion now, is whether another level of court needs to be created in there. We've talked about that from time to time on the Law Works, and that's what we're alluding to here, is whether we need that. The creation of the business court kind of takes some of the pressure for that off, does it not?
I think that it does, and one of the things about the business court, this is something where businesses who have suits against other businesses, very complex litigation, they can go into a different forum where judges have received special training for those types of cases, where cases, instead of being taking 2, maybe 3 years to resolve, maybe more, can be resolved in 10 months or less. And I think it's a very positive thing. And we're at the infancy of this, and I think people will be pleased as this goes forward.
The way the court used to operate was if I had a case that was decided at the circuit court level and I or my client wanted to appeal that decision, we would come down and seek your permission to appeal the case. When I say your, I mean the permission of the Supreme Court. We would present a petition for appeal. The court would decide whether or not to accept it, and if it was accepted, then we would go forward. But there was no reason given for declining to review the case. That changed with the new rules.
That changed with the new rules. And one comment about the old system, a lot of people didn't understand, and I believe the court maybe didn't do the best job in educating people as to what was happening. People would think, well, you didn't even consider my case. You didn't look at my case. But in fact, these cases were looked at. They were reviewed, and decisions were made that we believe this it can be decided this was decided correctly below. And things changed to where now you receive the arguments, the briefs from both sides of the aisle. You have a complete picture in front of the court. So every case is heard by the Supreme Court. And there is, at a minimum, a memorandum decision issued in every case that leaves the court. The court issues more than 10,000 orders per year.
Curiously, though, the old system where we would come down and say, basically, please accept this case and review it on appeal, and the court would say, okay, or you would say, no, is the same system the United States Supreme Court uses. You present a case to the United States Supreme Court, and if they just say no, that's all you know about it, that's all you hear, and the judgment from the lower court is what is followed.
Well, and I think communication is very important. And I also think that governing bodies, whether we're talking about the executive, legislative, or the judicial branches, should never stop looking at themselves and figuring out ways to do things better. And I think the change in the rules was a very positive change.
Did that increase the workload on the court?
It did increase the workload, but I can tell you that right now the Supreme Court, and a lot of your viewers won't actually know this, but we have 5 members of the Supreme Court. They're elected members, and they're elected for 12-year terms. I can tell you that right now there is an incredible level of congeniality between those 5 members. People get along very, very well, and things are going very well.
I've had that conversation with, I think, every member of the current court.
And that doesn't mean that we always agree on everything, but you can disagree in an agreeable way.
You're 5 very distinct, very opinionated, very well-educated personalities.
Well, I don't know how to respond to that because that's a positive about
well,
me.
it's okay to say yes.
They're good people at the court, and I really, really love my job.
You worked for the Supreme Court, then you have become a justice on the Supreme Court. Was it hard to go from employee to being justice? I mean, you are now supreme.
It was not, and I know that may sound very surprising. But I had worked at the court for the prior 10 years. And after this long, drawn-out election, I won, and the next day I went into my office and several things were slid under my door that said, Justice-elect Loughry, we're going to discuss this in January. This is going to happen in February. And it was different for me because it was in the building already. And not just in the building, but in the office. And so one day rolled into the next, and it feels like I've been there for 10 years.
Well, you have. You now just get to put your name on the opinions.
Well, that's right.
There came a time where the first day, you had been sworn in, and you're still probably feeling good about yourself. And they have this large, maroon curtain that you step out from behind. Just as they do at the United States Supreme Court, you just kind of materialize from behind the curtain, and you sit down in this large leather chair. What was going through your mind the first time you came out?
Well, this was very early in January because the court takes, our term starts before the executive or legislative members. And actually for me, if you step back to December 14th, that was when we had my swearing-in ceremony. And it was also my father's 75th birthday.
Oh, that's neat.
And I really was glad we could do that. And I recall stepping out, I was about to walk through the curtain on that date, And I remember kind of saying to myself, well, I guess this is real now. But as far as the day of the first day of arguments, again, the five of us get along really well. We know each other very well, and it was almost like another day.
So nothing special?
Well, it's very special. I mean, it's very special. I feel very honored and I feel very humbled to have this opportunity, but I felt very comfortable at the same point.
Okay, you're sitting up there now, and you look out and you see lawyers of all ages, some great lawyers, some lawyers you don't know. What has surprised you most about what you see happening in front of the court?
Well, you know, I get to look at this from somewhat of a different angle, because even for the last 10 years, I've been participating in writing opinions, watching arguments, but the 7 years prior to that, I was arguing in front of the court as a senior assistant attorney general. So a lot of my life, the last 17 plus years, has been associated directly with the appellate branch of government. So I'm not sure that I'm extremely surprised by what I see. And like you said, you see some lawyers who are very prepared, some great briefs that they present, and some who are not at the same point. And even when that happens, the court looks at everything, and the clerks behind the scenes do a tremendous amount of work, and we try to issue good opinions.
I'm talking with the newest member of the West Virginia Supreme Court, Justice Allen Loughry. I'm Dan Ringer, and this is The Law Works. As you were running for the court, for the position on the court, did you sense any payback for having written an expose about the political system that you were now involved in?
Well, how much time do you have, Dan?
We have about 8 minutes.
That's not enough. You know, there certainly was some of that, and that's the nature of politics in West Virginia. But I'm comfortable with that. I got into this with a tremendous family support, and I just wanted to get into this and do something and try to contribute in some positive way.
But you still had to get out into the counties. You still had to meet with the local party officials. You ran as a Republican.
Yes.
You have been a Democrat in another life.
In another life.
So you have people looking at you skeptically, saying, why should we support you, or what are you going to do for us? How do you relate to those things after everything that you knew about what's really going on back there?
Here's what I found out. When you went to public forums, and for 1.5 to 2 years, I went to so many local dinners and forums and meetings. Really, in most of these areas, you're just talking with average West Virginians, and they want to know who you are. They want to have some sense, can I trust this person? Are they, what's their background, et cetera. And running for judicial office is different also, because we're under a different set of rules. So basically, you would present yourself to people and say, this is who I am. This is my professional background. This is my educational background. Let me tell you a little bit about my family. Do you have any questions for me? And we just did that everywhere we went, and it seemed to go well.
An awful lot of West Virginians cannot name the 3 branches of government. You mentioned them a little while ago. The legislative, that's the people who make the laws. The executive, that's the people who enforce the laws. And the judicial, that's the people who interpret the laws and apply them to the circumstances of a particular case. What were the ordinary West Virginians concerned about? Did you get a chance to get a sense of anything like that?
Well, people, when you mentioned the book, a lot of people had actually read the book, and a lot of people came up to me and wanted to talk about this. People want to see things change in West Virginia in a positive way, not change for change's sake, but change in positive ways. But people don't know what to do. They feel helpless in many ways, because they think, how do I change a system that's been in place for generations? And I think a lot of people, I found that I had to explain more about what the judicial branch does. Some people would think that the governor was the head of the judicial branch, which is not true. So one of the things that I want to do for the next 12 years is try to get the word out there about this branch of government, which is critically important to people's lives. Everything that we do in one way or another affects your life and every viewer that's watching right now.
Every time you make a decision, it causes ripples throughout the system.
It can be a decision that deals with hundreds of millions of dollars. It can be a decision about a convicted murderer. It can be a decision about termination of parental rights. That net is very wide.
One area that there have been numerous Supreme Court decisions made in, West Virginia Supreme Court decisions made in, that affects people, and we hear it here on this program all the time. People want to know what their rights are as a grandparent. And a lot of that law is made by interpretation of the laws the legislature passes. And remarkably, the whole law of that area could change with one opinion. The right case comes in, the right circumstances, and the right number of judges, justices say, you know, that's not right. Let's change our interpretation of that law.
Well, in many ways, you could make that argument about
anything else.
Anything that comes before the court. So I think it's very important that people, just like this election, we chose 40%, nearly 40% of the judicial branch for the next 12 years. And this branch of government is a separate, co-equal branch of government.
12 years is the length of the term that a West Virginia Supreme Court justice serves. That gives you a chance to stop worrying about running for re-election, to bear down on the job and not have to think about the political ramifications.
I've told my wife, I said, it gives you a chance to do this amazing thing, your job. And that's what I plan to do. And if in 12 years, when I'm running for election again, if I'm not reelected, I will feel very comfortable knowing that I tried to make good, solid decisions and to reflect positively on this branch of government.
In the last couple of minutes that we have here, you wrote your book as a critical analysis of the way politics have been run in West Virginia. You said just a few minutes ago that the system needs to change. You'd like to help the system change. Do you think politics in West Virginia can change?
Most certainly I do. And one thing that I want to point out is I wrote this book because I want to see that change, but also the book does not mean that anybody who runs for public office is corrupt or a bad person. In fact, it's quite the opposite. And it's that the minority of these individuals who do some of these very egregious acts make a lot of good people look bad at the end of the day. So, I want young people in particular to look at my election and realize that an average West Virginian can actually participate and to get involved. There are wonderful people in public service.
One of the things that prompted the creation of this television program 14 years ago was that we had hopes that if people could see attorneys talking about their problems and the need for change and the way things happen, they would feel more comfortable with the system. And I had a group of lawyers tell me one time, said, well, you've been doing this program for X number of years and people don't think any better of us. And the only response I could make was, well, there are still some of you out there messing up and hurting people. So one person does that and months or years of good works just kind of go down the drain.
Well, and that's right. And oftentimes when something happens, even in a county clerk's office with vote buying or something, it becomes one more string in a big ball of yarn. And a lot of average West Virginians say, well, here we go again. And that's frustrating to me because, again, there are wonderful people that get involved and very good, dedicated people.
Well, I want to go back again. I'm really not trying to sell your book, but I want to mention it. This is the West Virginia history that adults need to read. This is the adult version of West Virginia history. There is information in here about how we became a state, about the Hatfields and McCoys, and about everything else. And it's got the stamp of approval both of Senator Byrd before his death and of Senator McCain. So you got to think it's kind of an objective look at the whole thing. Justice Allen Loughry, thank you, sir, for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you also for being with us. On behalf of the Law Works, I'm Dan Ringer. Good evening.
If you would like to suggest a topic for a future The Law Works show, or if you're a school teacher and would like to receive a DVD of this show for classroom use, send us an email to thelawworks@comcast.net or visit us on Facebook. On the Law Works website at thelawworks.org, you'll find a listing of recent The Law Works programs, additional information about this show's topic, and video of this and recent shows. You can also find the Law Works programs on YouTube and iTunes.
The Law Works is produced in cooperation with the Office of the West Virginia Attorney General, the West Virginia Bar Foundation, the Mountain State Bar, the Monongalia County Bar Association, and the West Virginia University College of Law. The Law Works is made possible by major grants from the Office of the West Virginia Attorney General and from Software Systems Incorporated, a West Virginia company established in 1975 which provides high-end support services, programming, and consulting for county government AS400 mid-range computer systems as well as PC-based systems, and by a grant from the West Virginia Bar Foundation. The West Virginia Bar Foundation, the philanthropic organization for West Virginia's legal profession and justice system, promoting public knowledge of the law in West Virginia. Additional support for the Law Works is provided by the West Virginia Supreme Court of Appeals.
From West Virginia Public Broadcasting.